The encounter in the stars. The vast silence of space was a comfort for Captain Leo Palmer. Known as a skilled pilot and resilient adventurer, Leo was someone who thrived in solitude, especially amidst the vastness of the galaxy. Yet, even he couldn't shake the growing sense that the universe held endless mysteries still waiting for him. He lounged in the cockpit of his ship, the Pioneer, marveling at the swirl of distant stars, galaxies, and nebulae. But this night would be different. Suddenly, the tranquil hum of his control panel erupted with an urgent signal. His radar, usually passive in this remote sector, flashed a bright warning. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he scanned the system data. Ahead, drifting without power, was a small, battered spacecraft. Its exterior bore the scars of heavy fire, and the life support systems seemed to be failing. Leo hesitated. Experience had taught him to be wary of unknown vessels, especially ones this far from standard space lanes. But his conscience wouldn't allow him to ignore the potential lives at stake. His hand moved to the scanner, running a sweep for life signs. To his surprise, 2 weak signals appeared, pulsing faintly in the quiet vastness of space. "All right," Leo muttered to himself. "Let's see what's going on here." With a quick command, he redirected the Pioneer toward the damaged vessel, his ship's engines powering to life as he closed the gap. As he approached, the details became clearer. The ship wasn't just damaged. It looked as though it had been pursued and attacked relentlessly. The once sleek design was pocked with plasma burns, and entire sections of the hull were scorched beyond recognition. Whoever had attacked this vessel hadn't shown mercy. When Leo's ship finally docked, he geared up, securing his helmet and weapons, just in case. The airlock between the two vessels slid open, filling the small passageway with an icy chill. He cautiously stepped into the stranger's ship, flashlight in hand. The interior was dark, punctuated by the soft red glow of emergency lights. The silence was eerie, broken only by the faint hiss of leaking air. His footsteps echoed as he advanced, his senses heightened. Then he saw her. In the dim light, a figure stood cradling a small child. She was tall and graceful, with skin an otherworldly shade of azure. Her eyes, deep violet and filled with a mixture of relief and worriness, met his. Her face was framed by locks of silvery hair that shimmered even in the low light, casting a haunting glow. She looked regal, yet exhausted, a figure who had once commanded respect but was now reduced to a fugitive. "Please," he said, her voice barely above a whisper, "help us." Leo's gaze dropped to the child, a small girl with wide, fearful eyes, clinging to her mother's cloak. It was clear they'd been through an ordeal. The sight stirred something protective within him. "My name's Leo," he introduced himself, keeping his voice calm. "Captain Leo Palmer. I don't know what happened, but you're safe now." She nodded, the tension in her shoulders easing ever so slightly. "I am Princess Serafina, and this is my daughter, Aria. We've been on the run for a long time. Our enemies, they will find us. They always do." Her voice trembled as she spoke, but her gaze remained steady, a glint of defiance shining through her exhaustion. "Who's after you?" Leo asked, scanning their surroundings for any clues about their pursuers. "The Dominion," she replied, the word laced with a bitterness that left no doubt about her feelings. "A ruthless empire that rules countless worlds with an iron fist. They captured my planet, our people, and enslaved anyone who resisted. I managed to escape with Aria, but they won't stop until we're either captured or dead." Leo felt a surge of anger at the thought of such tyranny. He'd encountered his share of oppressive regimes, but something about the helplessness in Serafina's eyes struck a nerve. "Well, they won't find you here," he assured her. "The Pioneer has enough stealth tech to keep us hidden from most scanners. At least for now." Serafina let out a relieved sigh. "Thank you, Captain Palmer. I'll repay you however I can. Just keep Aria safe." "You don't owe me anything," Leo replied, surprised by the intensity of his own words. "I don't leave people behind. especially not those running from tyrants. Before he could say anything more, a sudden warning blared from the control room of the Pioneer. His heart sank as he realized that he'd underestimated the Dominion's reach. A quick glance out of the viewport confirmed his fears. 3 Dominion fighters had warped into the vicinity, hovering just outside, like predators circling wounded prey. "Looks like they found you sooner than we thought," Leo muttered, more to himself than to her. His mind raced, evaluating his options. The fighters would overpower him in a direct confrontation, but the thought of surrendering Serafina and her daughter was out of the question. Serafina looked at him with pleading eyes, desperation evident on her face. "Please, don't let them take us back. They'll show no mercy." He didn't need any more convincing. "All right, here's the plan," he said, slipping into a tone of command. "Get to the rear of the ship and strap in. I'm going to get us out of here, but it's going to be rough." Without waiting for her reply, he bolted to the cockpit, his mind already calculating the maneuvers he'd need to make. The Dominion fighters had already begun their approach, closing in like wolves. Leo clenched his jaw, his hands moving swiftly over the controls. "Hold on tight," he shouted through the intercom as he engaged the thrusters, sending the Pioneer into a steep dive. The ship lurched as he pushed it to its limits, weaving through a field of asteroids in a desperate attempt to shake their pursuers. He threw the ship into a sharp roll, dodging the barrage of plasma fire that erupted from the fighters. In the back of the ship, Serafina held Arya close, her arms wrapped protectively around her daughter as they were tossed back and forth by the violent maneuvers. She glanced around the cramped quarters, her face reflecting both fear and hope as Leo's skill kept them one step ahead of their attackers. Just as Leo thought he'd lost them, a searing blast rocked the Pioneer, sending it spiraling. Alarms blared, and the ship's lights flickered ominously. Leo gritted his teeth, fighting the controls to regain stability. They were hit, but still intact. The Dominion fighters loomed closer, preparing for another strike. His options were dwindling. He quickly plotted a course for the nearest hyperspace jump point. It would be risky with the damage they'd sustained, but it was the only shot they had. "Come on, Pioneer, just a little further," he urged the ship, his fingers flying over the controls as he initiated the jump sequence. The Dominion fighters, realizing his plan, accelerated, hoping to cut him off before he could escape. But Leo was faster. With a final surge of power, the Pioneer shot forward, the stars stretching into streaks of light as they leaped into hyperspace. The Dominion ships vanished behind them, left in the wake of their desperate escape. As the ship stabilized in the relative calm of hyperspace, Leo slumped back in his seat, exhaling a long breath. He activated the intercom. "We're safe, for now." He made his way back to where Serafina and Arya were. Serafina looked up, her eyes filled with gratitude and a lingering hint of vulnerability. "Thank you, Captain Palmer. You saved our lives." Leo shrugged, feeling an unfamiliar warmth at her words. "Just doing what's right." Serafina held his gaze, her voice softening. "There aren't many who would risk everything for strangers. You're different." He gave her a wry smile. "I'll take that as a compliment, but we're not out of this yet. The Dominion won't give up so easily. We're going to need a plan, and a safe place to hide." For the first time, a flicker of hope crossed her face. "I know of a place," she whispered. "A world hidden from the Dominion. If we can reach it, they'll never find us." Leo nodded, determination settling over him. "Then that's where we're headed." As the Pioneer hurtled through hyperspace, a fragile alliance formed between the battle-worn captain and the fugitive princess. Neither knew what awaited them, but they shared a single, unspoken understanding. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The journey had just begun, and with it, a new adventure that would test the strength of their wills and the resilience of their hearts. The Hidden Sanctuary. The journey through hyperspace was smooth, but tension lingered in the air aboard the Pioneer. Captain Leo Palmer sat in the cockpit, his gaze fixed on the ever-shifting blue hues outside the viewport. Thoughts of Serafina and her daughter Aria weighed on his mind, along with the impending threat of the Dominion. This wasn't the kind of fight he usually picked, but something about their situation stirred an unshakable sense of duty within him. He keyed in the coordinates Serafina had shared, a secret world she claimed was hidden from Dominion sensors. It sounded almost mythical, a sanctuary where the Dominion's reach fell short, and its influence was all but non-existent. Leo wasn't one to believe in fairy tales, but Serafina's desperation was real enough. If she had even a shred of hope in this place, he'd see it through. Down in the ship's living quarters, Serafina and Aria huddled together on a narrow cot, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and guarded relief. Aria had finally fallen asleep, her small hands clutching a worn plush toy, the last remnant of her home. Serafina watched her daughter with tired but vigilant eyes, her mind heavy with the weight of their journey. Noticing Leo's approach, she straightened, careful not to wake Aria. "Captain Palmer," she whispered, nodding toward him. "Leo's fine," he replied, offering a half-smile. "You can skip the formalities. After all, we're not exactly on royal ground here." A faint smile boasted across her face. "Leo, then, I still can't believe you risked everything back there. Not many would do that for strangers." He shrugged, leaning casually against the doorway. "Guess I'm not most people." Serafina took a deep breath, her gaze dropping to her daughter. "This place we're going to, I pray it's everything they say. It's been a legend for centuries among my people, a hidden world known as Elara. It's said to be a place untouched by war or strife, where refugees from across the galaxy have found peace. If we reach it, we could finally be safe." Leo nodded, listening intently. "Elara, huh? Never heard of it, but I've seen stranger things out here, so I'm willing to bet it's real enough." For the first time, Serafina's expression softened. "I've held on to this hope for so long, I sometimes wonder if it's a fool's errand. But with the Dominion at our heels, it's our only chance." Leo straightened, confidence hardening his resolve. "Well, fool's errand or not, we're almost there. The Pioneer has a knack for finding places people don't want to be found." As if on cue, the ship's navigational system chirped, signaling their arrival. Leo glanced at Serafina, then returned to the cockpit to prepare for the exit from hyperspace. He activated the deceleration sequence, and soon the swirling blue light outside the viewport faded into the blackness of space. But this was no ordinary void. Directly ahead, nestled among shifting asteroid fields and dense cosmic dust, was a planet. Serafina joined him in the cockpit, her eyes widening as she took in the view. The planet was a lush sphere of green and blue, shrouded in swirling white clouds. It was beautiful, pristine, and unlike anything Leo had ever seen in the more industrialized regions of space. It looked like a paradise untouched by the ravages of war. "Welcome to Elara," she whispered, a glimmer of hope in her voice. Leo piloted the Pioneer with caution, steering the ship through the asteroid field. The sensors beeped in warning, but his experienced hands guided them deftly past every obstacle. It was as if the asteroid field was a natural defense, a barrier that deterred all but the most determined. As they approached the planet's atmosphere, the ship's controls started to flicker. He tapped at the console, trying to stabilize the systems, but nothing worked. Leo frowned. "There's some kind of interference. It's jamming our systems." Serafina looked thoughtful. "Elara is rumored to have natural defenses, electromagnetic fields that disrupt technology. It keeps the planet hidden and untraceable." Leo muttered a curse under his breath, but he kept his grip steady on the controls. "That's all well and good until you actually try to land here. Hold on tight, this could get bumpy." With practiced ease, he guided the Pioneer through the interference, each dip and dive testing his skill. Serafina clutched the armrest beside her, a look of quiet determination on her face, while Aria slept soundly in the cabin, blissfully unaware of the danger outside. At last, they broke through the interference and descended into the planet's atmosphere. Thick forests stretched out beneath them, vibrant green and teeming with life. The sky was a soft lavender hue, painted with clouds that cast long shadows over the landscape. Leo carefully brought the ship to a clearing at the edge of a dense forest, touching down with a soft thud. The engines powered down, and for the first time in what felt like ages, silence settled over the cabin. Leo stood and looked at Serafina. "Welcome to Elara. Let's hope this place lives up to the legends." They exited the ship, the fresh, cool air of Elara filling their lungs. The clearing was surrounded by towering trees with bark of silver and leaves that shimmered faintly, reflecting the light in every color of the spectrum. Birds and other creatures flitted about, singing melodies foreign to their ears but strangely soothing. As they walked a short distance from the ship, Serafina took in her surroundings with wide eyes. "I've dreamed of this place for so long, I didn't think it would be real." "Me neither," Leo admitted, casting a cautious look around. "But I keep your guard up. Hidden paradises aren't usually without their own dangers." Just as he finished speaking, a group of cloaked figures emerged from the shadows of the trees, surrounding them silently. Leo's hand instinctively went to his sidearm, but Serafina placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Wait," she murmured. "Let's see who they are." The figures stepped forward, revealing faces marked by wisdom and wariness, a mixture of species united in purpose. The leader, a tall, thin figure with glowing eyes and skin that seemed to blend with the forest, spoke in a deep, resonant voice. "You have come to Elara, the sanctuary. What brings you here?" Serafina stepped forward, bowing slightly. "We seek refuge. My daughter and I have been hunted by the Dominion, and I fear they will never stop until we are captured or worse. We need a place to hide, to rebuild." The leader studied her with an intense gaze. "We know of the Dominion's cruelty. Many here have fled from their tyranny, but Elara is more than a refuge. It is a place of healing and harmony, and we guard it fiercely. Those who stay here must respect our ways and commit to a life of peace." Leo stepped forward. "I'm not one for conflict if it can be avoided, but if they come for us, I won't stand idly by." The leader's piercing gaze softened as he addressed Leo. "You speak with strength, but remember that strength must serve more than survival. Here, we learn to use our gifts to preserve peace, to find balance with each other and with this world. You are welcome to stay if you're willing to protect that balance." Leo nodded, feeling the weight of the leader's words settle over him. Elara was unlike any place he'd ever encountered, and he could sense its influence already seeping into him, calming the restlessness that had always driven him. The leader gestured toward a path that wound through the trees. "Come, we have a village where you may rest and find your place among us. But be mindful, should the Dominion come, we will need all who reside here to stand as one." With a final glance at each other, Leo and Serafina followed the cloaked figures deeper into the forest, Aria clinging to her mother's hand, wide-eyed with curiosity. They passed through groves of bioluminescent flowers that glowed faintly in the twilight, illuminating their path with soft, shifting hues. The village emerged gradually, a harmonious blend of nature and shelter, with buildings that seemed to grow organically from the trees and earth. As they settled into a modest shelter prepared for them, Leo couldn't shake the feeling that Elara was more than just a sanctuary. It was a place where even he could find a sense of purpose beyond the relentless drive to survive. And as he looked over at Serafina, who held a sleeping daughter close, he sensed a new determination building within him. For the first time in years, Leo felt a glimmer of something he had long given up on: hope. The hidden sanctuary of Elara had offered them more than refuge. It had given them the promise of a life worth fighting for. But as night fell and the stars cast their light over the tranquil village, he knew that the Dominion would not be deterred for long. And when they came, he would be ready. The shadows of Dominion. Days passed peacefully on Elara, a planet as strange and beautiful as the legends had promised. Captain Leo Palmer found himself settling into an unlikely rhythm. He was unused to staying in one place, let alone in a village where tranquility ruled and technology was almost non-existent. But here, among the towering trees and vibrant, bioluminescent flora, he felt a calm that he hadn't known in years. Serafina and her daughter Aria quickly became part of the close-knit community. The villagers had embraced them warmly, and Aria thrived, her laughter ringing through the forest as she explored alongside the other children. The constant weight of fear she had carried seemed to lift, replaced by a childlike wonder at her new world. Serafina, too, found solace in the healing rituals practiced by the villagers who taught her the ancient ways of their sanctuary. She seemed to come alive in a way Leo had never seen before, her once wary demeanor now softened by hope. Despite the peace, Leo's instincts never fully relaxed. He had stationed himself as a guardian of sorts, often volunteering for night patrols along the village's perimeter, walking the paths among the trees and listening to the sounds of the forest. He knew that this quiet paradise wouldn't last forever. The Dominion had a relentless reach, and the knowledge weighed on him like a shadow. One evening, as he returned from his patrol, he found Serafina waiting for him at the edge of the village, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of the village lights. She had changed from the desperate fugitive he'd met weeks ago, now carrying herself with a renewed grace and strength. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, keeping his tone light as he approached. Serafina offered him a small smile. "Not tonight. I sensed you were troubled. You've been on edge since we arrived." Leo gave a weary sigh. "It's hard to believe a place like this can stay hidden forever. I don't want to bring trouble here, but—" He looked away, hesitant. "I can't shake the feeling that they're coming." She nodded, her gaze distant. "I feel it too. The Dominion's reach is long, and they've tracked me through every corner of the galaxy. But I had to believe Ilara would be different. It's the last hope for Aria and me." Leo softened, noticing the fear lingering behind her brave front. "I'll protect you both. Whatever happens, I'll make sure they don't take you." She looked at him, gratitude mixed with something unspoken. "Thank you, Leo. You've already done so much. But you're right. We need to prepare." The quiet conversation was interrupted by the sudden arrival of Ilara's leader, the tall, otherworldly figure they'd met upon their arrival. He moved with a quiet grace, his eyes reflecting the ambient glow of the forest. Leo had learned that the villagers referred to him as Elder Solan. Although his origins remained a mystery, he was respected and trusted by all. "Captain Palmer, Princess Serafina," Solan greeted them with a nod, his voice deep and soothing. "I had a feeling you would be here tonight." Leo raised an eyebrow, accustomed to Solan's uncanny intuition. "Is something wrong?" Solan's gaze turned toward the night sky, where the stars glimmered faintly between the branches. "Ilara is strong, and it has protected us for centuries, but tonight, I felt a disturbance in the balance, a presence that does not belong. The Dominion is near." Leo's hand instinctively moved to his weapon, though he knew it would be little use against a fleet. "How close?" Solan gestured for them to follow him. They moved through the village and into the dense forest, where the night grew darker, the sounds of the wild creatures more pronounced. At the edge of a cliff, he pointed to a small glimmer in the distant sky, barely visible but unmistakably artificial. "That is a Dominion scout," Solan said, his tone grave. "They are searching for us. Once they confirm our location, more will follow. We must act quickly if we are to remain safe." Serafina's face paled. "Is there any way we can hide the village?" Solan's gaze was thoughtful. "There are ancient shields in place that mask our presence, but they are weakened by time and lack of use. The Dominion's technology will eventually pierce through, unless we strengthen the barriers." Leo looked between them, assessing the situation. "How do we reinforce the shields?" Solan turned to Leo, his expression solemn. "The heart of Ilara, the source of our power, lies deep within the forest. The barriers are bound to the land itself, and they draw energy from a place we call the Well of Ancients. But the path is treacherous, guarded by ancient creatures that awaken only in times of need. If you are willing to undertake this journey, I believe the well will grant us the strength to defend our sanctuary." Without hesitation, Leo nodded. I'll go, just tell me what to do. Seraphina's eyes widened with worry. Leo, are you sure? The forest is dangerous, and the creatures, they're not easily defeated. Leo gave her a reassuring smile. I faced worse. Besides, if it means keeping this place safe, it's worth the risk. Solon inclined his head in gratitude. You have a brave heart, Captain Palmer. I will prepare the path for you, but be cautious. The forest has a will of its own, and it does not welcome outsiders easily. As Solon departed to make the preparations, Seraphina stepped closer, her expression conflicted. Leo, I don't know how to thank you. I don't want you to risk your life for us. He looked at her, his gaze steady. I told you before, I don't leave people behind. You and Ariad deserve a chance to live without fear. I'll be back before you know it. Her hand lingered on his arm, her eyes searching his. For a moment, they stood in silence, a connection unspoken but undeniable passing between them. Finally, she nodded, her voice a whisper. Be careful. Leo gave her a reassuring nod and turned, steeling himself for the journey ahead. He gathered his gear, a few supplies, and took one last look at the village before setting off into the forest. The trees loomed overhead like silent sentinels, their branches weaving a dense canopy that blocked out the stars. The air was thick with the scent of moss and earth, and every sound seemed amplified in the quiet darkness. As he walked, Leo felt an eerie presence surrounding him. It was as if the forest itself was watching him, judging his intentions. He moved cautiously, each step measured, his senses attuned to the faint sounds that echoed through the trees. After an hour of trekking, he reached a narrow path lined with strange, glowing stones. The light from the stones illuminated a massive tree with twisted roots that sprawled across the ground. At the base of the tree, an opening led downward, revealing a staircase that seemed to descend into the very heart of the planet. This must be the way to the well, Leo muttered, steeling himself as he began the descent. The deeper he went, the cooler the air became, and the light from the stones grew dimmer. He could hear the faint sound of rushing water, though he couldn't yet see its source. After what felt like an eternity, he reached a vast cavern. In its center was a shimmering pool of water, illuminated by a soft, otherworldly light, the Well of Ancients. Leo approached the pool, his breath catching as he looked into the water. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen, a silvery liquid that seemed to pulse with energy, as if it were alive. He knelt beside it, unsure of how to proceed, when he felt a strange warmth radiate from the pool. Without warning, shadows moved at the edge of his vision. He turned to see a massive creature emerge from the darkness, a guardian of the well. Its form was serpentine, its scales glimmering in shades of green and blue, and its eyes glowed with a fierce intelligence. The creature regarded him silently, waiting. Leo took a deep breath, steadying his resolve. I'm here to protect Elara, to defend it from those who seek to destroy it. I need the power of the well to keep the Dominion away. The creature's gaze remained unwavering. Then, slowly, it inclined its head, acknowledging his purpose. Leo felt a surge of energy wash over him, and he realized that the creature was granting him permission to draw from the well. He reached out, his fingers skimming the surface of the silvery water. As he touched it, a surge of warmth spread through him, filling him with a strength he'd never known. Visions flashed before his eyes, the history of Elara, the battles it had endured, the sacrifices of those who had fought to keep it safe. He felt a kinship with the ancient protectors of this land, a sense of purpose that resonated deep within him. When the vision faded, he was left breathless, his body buzzing with newfound power. The creature watched him for a moment longer before it retreated into the shadows, leaving him alone by the well. Leo rose, his mind clear and his mission set. He had what he needed to strengthen the shields. As he retraced his steps, he felt the forest guiding him, easing his journey back. By the time he reached the village, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon. Seraphina and Solon were waiting for him, relief evident on their faces as he approached. He nodded to them, a quiet assurance in his gaze. The shields are reinforced. Ilara's protected for now. Seraphina's eyes shone with gratitude. Thank you, Leo. You've given us hope. He looked over the village, feeling the weight of his responsibility. Let's hope it's enough, because if the Dominion finds us here, this might be the last stand. And as the sun rose, casting its light over the sanctuary of Ilara, Leo knew that the battle was far from over. But for the first time, he felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. Together, they would protect this hidden world and perhaps find a new purpose in the process. The Dominion's approach. The following days passed in tense anticipation. Though Leo had returned with renewed strength from the Well of Ancients, everyone in Ilara sensed the invisible thread of threat that lingered. Despite the reinforced shields, the Dominion scouts continued to probe the planet's defenses, their presence casting a shadow over the sanctuary. For the villagers, the peaceful routine of life on Ilara was replaced by whispered conversations, hurried preparations, and silent prayers. Leo, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders, spent every hour training, scouting, and coordinating with the village's protectors. He had become more than just a stranger. He was now a leader, a guardian in their eyes. Seraphina watched his tireless efforts with both gratitude and growing admiration, finding solace in his unwavering determination. One evening, Leo gathered a small group in the village's central meeting hall. The room was lit by flickering lanterns that cast shadows on the wooden walls, and the faces around him were filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. Among the group were Elder Solon, Seraphina, and a handful of trusted villagers who had taken on the role of scouts and protectors. Elder Solon began, his voice calm but filled with gravity. The Dominion will not rest until they find us. Even now, they test our shields, searching for weaknesses. Our defenses have held, thanks to Captain Palmer's efforts, but we cannot rely on the well's power alone. Leo nodded, scanning the faces in the room. If they launch a full-scale attack, the shields won't be enough. We need to be prepared for when, not if, they break through. One of the scouts, a broad-shouldered man named Kale, spoke up. But we don't have the weapons or the numbers to face them directly. We're farmers, healers. This is a peaceful village, not a battleground. Leo listened intently, nodding in agreement. That's exactly why we need a different approach. We'll use Ilara's natural defenses, the forests, the rivers, the cliffs, to our advantage. Guerrilla tactics, misdirection. We may not have firepower, but we know this land better than they ever will. We'll make them fight on our terms. Seraphina's gaze was thoughtful as she watched him. But won't they see us as only a small resistance? They'll think we're weak, and that could drive them to more desperate measures. Leah's eyes glinted with a steely resolve. Let them think we're weak. Underestimating us is the biggest mistake they can make. The villagers murmured their agreement, their fear gradually giving way to a cautious hope. Solon raised his hand, signaling for silence. We must also protect the young and the vulnerable. There are hidden caverns beyond the village that have sheltered us in past conflicts. Kale, you and a few others will be responsible for ensuring everyone reaches safety should the Dominion breach our defenses. Kale nodded, a solemn look on his face. Understood. I'll make sure they're protected. Leo turned his attention to Seraphina, who had remained quiet, her gaze focused and intent. Seraphina, I'd like you to be on lookout duty with me. You know the Dominion's tactics better than anyone here, and I could use someone who understands how they think. She gave a firm nod. Of course. I've spent my life hiding from them, but I won't hide anymore. I'll fight. As the meeting concluded, Leo felt a renewed sense of purpose among the villagers. These weren't trained soldiers, but they were ready to defend their home and their freedom with everything they had. As he and Seraphina walked out into the night, he could see the first glimmering stars overhead, the only witnesses to their quiet determination. The two walked side by side in silence until they reached a small overlook on the edge of the forest. From there, they could see the entire village spread out below, illuminated by soft lantern light. Leo paused, his gaze distant as he took in the peaceful scene, knowing it might soon be shattered. "Thank you, Leo," Serafina said softly, breaking the silence. "You've given these people hope. I don't know if we'd have stood a chance without you." He turned to her, a quiet sincerity in his expression. "Hope's a powerful thing, but I don't want you thinking this is just about duty. This fight, it's personal now. I've seen what the Dominion does. I know what's at stake, for you and for everyone here." She studied him for a moment, her violet eyes reflecting the starlight. "You're different from anyone I've met. You don't just fight for yourself, you fight for others, for a world you hardly know." A faint smile tugged at his lips. Maybe I just finally found something worth fighting for. Their gaze held, a silent understanding passing between them. In that moment, Leo felt a strange but undeniable bond form, a connection that went beyond duty or circumstance. They were both survivors, both wary of running, both determined to make this last stand count. Before either could say more, a distant rumble broke the tranquility of the night. The ground trembled faintly beneath their feet, and a flicker of light appeared on the horizon. Leo's expression hardened, his instincts immediately on high alert. "That's them," he said, his voice tense. "The Dominion." Serafina's face paled, but she steadied herself, her expression resolute. "What do we do?" "Gather the villagers," he instructed, already moving. "Tell everyone to get to the caverns. I'll take a few scouts and create a diversion, slow them down as much as we can." She nodded, her fear giving way to purpose as she turned and hurried back toward the village, her voice rising in warning. Leo watched her go, his heart pounding. He knew that if they failed here, Ilara's sanctuary would be lost, and with it, the lives of everyone who had found refuge in its quiet beauty. Leo quickly assembled a handful of scouts, instructing them to position themselves along key points where the Dominion forces would likely advance. They spread out, blending into the shadows of the trees, their breath held as the ground-shaking sounds grew closer. In the distance, the ominous silhouette of Dominion ships appeared, their metallic hulls reflecting the faint moonlight as they descended toward the village. He signaled the scouts, and they began their assault, a series of sudden ambushes, using makeshift traps and natural camouflage to catch the Dominion forces off guard. Arrows and stones rained down from hidden alcoves, and tree branches were rigged to swing down and knock unsuspecting soldiers to the ground. It was a crude form of resistance, but it worked. The Dominion troops faltered, confused by the terrain and the relentless, unseen attacks. But the Dominion's response was brutal. They quickly regrouped, their precision weapons cutting through the underbrush as they advanced with cold efficiency. Leo's heart sank as he realized they were better prepared than he'd expected. They had sent specialized squads trained for jungle combat. The element of surprise was slipping through their fingers. He fired his blaster, taking down 2 soldiers who had broken through the lines, but even as he did, he saw more filling in the gaps. They were relentless, marching in formation, sweeping the forest as they pressed forward. The air was thick with the sound of laser fire, the sharp crackle of broken branches, and the cries of his comrades. Realizing that their defenses would soon be overrun, Leo signaled the remaining scouts to retreat. "Fall back," he shouted. "We can't hold them here. Regroup at the village." They withdrew, moving swiftly through the dense underbrush, guided by the faint light of the village lanterns. As they reached the clearing, Leo saw that the villagers had managed to evacuate, with Kale leading the children and elders toward the caverns. Serafina stood near the edge of the village, her face a mask of determination as she helped organize the last wave of evacuees. Seeing her, Leo felt a wave of relief, followed by renewed resolve. He crossed the distance between them, his gaze fierce. "They're coming." The traps slowed them down, but not for long. "We need to fortify our last line of defense." Serafina nodded, her jaw set. "The villagers are almost safe. We'll hold them off here as long as we can." Together, they led the remaining fighters to the outskirts of the village. setting up makeshift barricades and positioning themselves behind cover. They could hear the Dominion soldiers approaching, their heavy boots crunching through the forest floor, their voices carrying in the still night air. As the first wave of soldiers emerged from the shadows, Leo took aim, his blaster firing in quick, precise shots. The villagers fought valiantly beside him, using whatever weapons they had: bows, slings, even sharpened sticks. Seraphina moved with grace and precision, her eyes blazing as she defended her people, every strike a reminder of the strength that had carried her through years of exile. But the Dominion's forces were unyielding, their numbers overwhelming. Leo felt the weight of the battle pressing down on him, each moment stretching into an eternity as they fought to protect Elara. He knew they couldn't hold out much longer, but he refused to give up. Not now, not when so much was at stake. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, a brilliant light erupted from the heart of the forest. The Dominion soldiers hesitated, their eyes widening as they turned toward the source of the illumination. From the depths of the trees, a figure emerged, Elder Solon, his entire being radiating with the power of the well. His eyes glowed with a fierce intensity, and his voice thundered across the battlefield. "Leave this place, invaders. Elara's strength will not be broken." As Solon raised his hands, a surge of energy pulsed through the air, creating a barrier that forced the Dominion soldiers back, repelling them with an invisible force. The ground shook, and the trees seemed to come alive, their branches twisting and lashing out at the intruders. The Dominion troops scrambled, their formation breaking as they retreated in disarray. Leo watched in awe, his heart pounding with renewed hope. Solon's power was immense, a force that had been hidden, waiting for the moment it was most needed. As the last of the Dominion soldiers fled into the forest, Leo looked at Seraphina, a triumphant smile breaking through his exhaustion. They had won, for now. Elara was safe, its sanctuary preserved. But Leo knew that the battle was far from over. The Dominion would return, stronger and more determined than before. Yet as he looked out over the village, he felt a newfound strength rising within him, a determination that burned brighter than ever. For he had found his purpose, his place among these people, and as long as he had breath, he would fight to protect it. The gathering storm. Despite their recent victory, a quiet tension had settled over the village of Elara. The Dominion's retreat was only a temporary respite, and everyone knew it. Even as the villagers returned to their homes, rebuilding what little damage had been done, a shared understanding lingered in every glance and conversation. The Dominion would return, likely stronger and more ruthless. In the heart of the village, Leo and Seraphina met with Elder Solon to strategize. They stood around a rough map of the village, hastily drawn on a wooden table. Kale and a few other scouts joined them, their expressions grim but resolute. Each had a scar or a fresh wound, marks of their recent battle, but their spirits remained unbroken. Elder Solon's gaze was somber as he surveyed the map. This victory was only a taste of the Dominion's resolve. They are relentless in their pursuit, and their resources are vast. Next time, they will come with reinforcements, likely with heavier artillery and advanced tracking equipment. We must assume they will throw everything they have at us. Kale, always pragmatic, leaned forward. "Our traps held up well, but we can't rely on surprise again. They'll be expecting resistance and will prepare accordingly." Leo nodded, his jaw set in determination. "We'll need more than traps to withstand a full-scale assault. We have to turn this village into a fortress, use every resource and advantage Elara has to offer." Solon, listening quietly, finally spoke, his tone both calm and resolute. "The Well of Ancients can sustain the shields, but even its power has limits. I can draw from it again, but each time it drains the life energy of the land. The more I call upon its strength, the more fragile the balance becomes." Leo absorbed this information thoughtfully. "So it's a last resort then. If we overuse the well, we risk damaging the very sanctuary we're trying to protect." "Precisely," Solon agreed. "But there may be another way to harness Elara's strength without damaging it. Long ago, this land was defended by the guardians of Ilara, ancient protectors who wielded unique powers connected to the elements. Their knowledge has been lost to time, but there are legends of a hidden temple deep within the forest, where these guardians once trained and stored their artifacts. If we could find it, we might be able to unlock powers that could aid us in our defense. Seraphina's eyes lit up with curiosity. Do you believe the temple still exists? And if so, how can we find it? Solan's gaze grew distant. I cannot be certain, but the stories say that the temple's entrance lies somewhere in the far northern region of the forest. The path is treacherous, protected by natural defenses and ancient spells that only those of pure intent can navigate. Leo nodded. It's worth a shot. Even if we only find remnants of their knowledge, it could give us an edge. He turned to Kale and the other scouts. Prepare a team. We'll leave at dawn. The scouts nodded, determination glinting in their eyes. Kale clasped Leo's shoulder firmly. Count me in. If there's even a chance of finding something that can help, I'm ready. Seraphina hesitated, glancing between Leo and Solan. I should go too. I have a strong connection to this land, and if the Guardians were sensitive to intent, I may be able to help find the way. Leo's instinct was to object, to insist that she stay in the village where it was safer, but he knew better than to underestimate her. Seraphina had proven her strength and resilience time and again. He simply nodded. All right, we'll need all the help we can get. They spent the night in preparation, gathering supplies and weapons, making sure those left behind were well informed of their plans. Leo took a quiet moment to walk the village's perimeter, his gaze distant as he thought of what lay ahead. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, but it was a weight he had willingly chosen. This place, these people, they had become his own to protect. At dawn, the team set out into the dense northern forest. The air was thick with moisture, and the trees loomed overhead like ancient giants, their twisted roots and tangled branches creating a natural labyrinth. The path was narrow and overgrown, and each step seemed to pull them deeper into an uncharted world. Leo led the way, his senses alert, while Seraphina walked beside him, her hand occasionally brushing against tree trunks and vines, as if sensing the energy of the forest. Kale and two other scouts trailed behind, their eyes scanning every shadow, their weapons at the ready. They walked in silence, the only sounds being the occasional rustling of leaves and the distant calls of unseen creatures. Hours passed, and the forest seemed to close in around them, the light filtering through the canopy dimming as the path grew steeper. The air grew cooler, and a faint mist began to cling to the ground, swirling around their feet. Finally, they reached a clearing. In the center stood an ancient stone archway, partially overgrown with moss and vines. Symbols were carved into the stone, their edges worn and weathered, but still faintly visible. Seraphina approached the archway, her fingers tracing the carvings. "This is it," she murmured, "the Temple of the Guardians." As she spoke, a low hum resonated from the archway, as if responding to her touch. The mist around them thickened, and the temperature dropped noticeably. Leo felt a strange energy pulsing through the air, an ancient power that seemed to awaken at their presence. They stepped through the archway, and the world shifted around them. The forest gave way to a vast courtyard, its stone floors cracked and covered in lichen. Pillars lined the edges of the courtyard, each one adorned with symbols representing the elements: earth, fire, water, and air. At the far end, a tall statue of a warrior stood guard, its eyes seeming to watch them with an eerie intelligence. Kale looked around, his voice hushed. This place feels alive. Leo felt it too, a sense of being observed by something beyond their comprehension. He led the way toward the statue, its imposing figure casting a long shadow over them. Seraphina approached cautiously, her gaze locked on the warrior's face. According to the legends, the Guardians left their powers here, bound to these symbols and statues, she said softly. To those who prove their worth, the elements will offer their aid. As they stood before the statue, a deep voice echoed through the courtyard, resonating from the stone itself. Who dares to seek the power of the Guardians? Leo took a steadying breath, addressing the voice with unwavering resolve. We are the protectors of Elara, defenders of the innocent. The Dominion threatens to destroy everything we hold dear. We seek the strength to protect our home and our people. The voice was silent for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Then, the ground beneath them trembled, and the symbols on the pillars began to glow, each one igniting in turn: green for earth, red for fire, blue for water, and white for air. Streams of energy swirled around them, enveloping each member of the team in a different elemental glow. Leo felt a surge of heat course through him as the red light surrounded him, the essence of fire binding itself to his spirit. He felt stronger, his senses sharper, as if he had been granted a fragment of the element's raw, untamed power. Seraphina was enveloped in the green glow of earth, a steady, grounding force that seemed to connect her to the very heart of Elara. Kale and the other scouts were surrounded by the energies of water and air, their bodies feeling lighter and more agile, their minds clearer. The voice spoke again, quieter now, almost a whisper. You carry the weight of Elara's future on your shoulders. Use this power wisely, for it is both a gift and a burden. The elements will aid you in your defense, but they demand respect. Leo nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. We won't waste this gift. With the power of the elements coursing through them, they left the temple, each of them feeling transformed, their resolve unbreakable. As they retraced their steps through the forest, the path seemed easier, as if the forest itself recognized them now as allies. They returned to the village as the sun began to set, and the villagers greeted them with both relief and awe, sensing the change in them. Word of their journey to the temple spread quickly, and with it came a renewed hope, a belief that they could withstand whatever the Dominion brought. In the days that followed, they trained tirelessly, learning to harness their newfound powers. Leo practiced with his control over fire, creating controlled bursts and shields that could repel even the strongest attacks. Seraphina learned to call upon the earth, creating barriers and manipulating the ground to form protective walls around the village. Kale and the other scouts mastered their connection with water and air, moving with incredible speed and agility, blending seamlessly into the environment as they became near-invisible scouts and fighters. But even as they prepared, they knew that time was running out. The Dominion would return, this time with a full-scale invasion force, and when they did, Elara would be ready. On the eve of the impending battle, Leo stood at the edge of the village, looking out over the dark forest. Seraphina joined him, her presence a quiet comfort in the stillness. "Do you think we're ready?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. He looked at her, a fierce determination in his eyes. "We've done everything we can. Whatever happens tomorrow, we'll fight together, and we'll protect this place, no matter the cost." She met his gaze, her hand reaching out to rest on his arm. "Thank you, Leo, for everything." He nodded, feeling the unspoken bond between them strengthen. Together, they had forged a defense stronger than any weapon, one born from resilience, loyalty, and a love for this land and its people. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting a golden light over the village, the air filled with a quiet anticipation. The villagers, strengthened by their newfound hope and the power of the elements, stood united, ready to face the coming storm. And as the Dominion ships appeared in the distant sky, Leo and Seraphina took their places at the front, their resolve unbreakable. They were no longer fugitives or mere defenders, they were guardians of Elara, and they would fight for its survival with every breath.